my pleasure today to interview new members to the DIACC EY, the Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada. We have the pleasure and the honor of connecting some of the greatest minds and greatest doers across Canada and across the world. We're all committed to delivering digital identity that works for everyone, that secures our socioeconomic digital safety net. And we're thrilled to welcome EY to this discussion and to connect their leadership into this community and moving us all forward for digital identity, which is urgently needed in Canada. So without further ado, let's get started. I'd like to ask my guests today to introduce themselves. So let's start with Abhishek. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Joni. Hey, everyone. This is Abhishek Sinha. I'm a partner based out of our Toronto office, and I lead banking technology in Canada. Digital ID for us is a very important cross-sector issue, and we're really excited to be a part of DIACC under Joni's leadership and with all the wonderful companies that are collaborating together to move forward something as important as digital identity.
Amazing. Thank you and welcome to the community. Moving along, Peter, can we hear a bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Joni. So hi, everybody. My name is Peter Law. I'm part of EY's National Technology Transformation Practice based in Vancouver. And I sort of focus on a day-to-day basis, helping organizations to manage sort of the intersect between modern experience for customer and employees with emerging digital technologies. And there's nothing more important than the role that digital ID plays in that. So thank you.
Absolutely. We couldn't agree more on the importance to this agenda item for Canada. Thank you, Peter. And Atul, can we hear from you as well?
Hello, everyone. This is Atul here. I lead the digital identity practice here in EY Canada, and it's a national function which cuts through all the different industries and the region. And essentially, our focus have been around enabling the digital identity, not only just as a security control, but also enablement of the digital transformation, because digital identity is the epicenter and it is an enabler for many different functions such as user experience and all. And the most exciting part of it is that we now, being part of DIACC, we are in the right group to take the message to the broader section, both in the private and public sector, and considering what's going around in the industry with not only the COVID situation, with some of the breaches and all. I think the opportunity is now, really it's now to make the difference and set us in the right trajectory to ensure that individuals like each one of us have the right ecosystem of digital identity so that we can unleash get the full potential of digital identity.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Digital identity is both cross-cutting and foundational to all that we do in the public and private sector, not only for COVID, but for the full digital transformation realization. So we're really thrilled to connect your leadership and amplify the work that EY is contributing to this space. So welcome aboard. So let's start with, first I'd like to hear a bit more about your mission and vision and how that relates to digital identity. So Abhishek, can we hear from you and the mission and vision?
Absolutely. Our mission at EY is to build a better working world, helping create long-term value for our clients, people, and society. Through the work that we do, we aspire to make meaningful contributions to economies around the world and to ensure that economic growth is sustainable and inclusive. Whether it's fighting data privacy or guiding governments through cash flow crisis, our global teams work with entrepreneurs, public and private sector companies to help solve the most pressing challenges. These challenges only continue to evolve as digital transformation is accelerating in the COVID landscape. And that's putting digital identity on the boardroom agendas of both public and private sector companies in an effort to unlock significant benefits across digital ecosystems and to help solve fundamental issues of economic, social, and political inclusiveness. We think that digital identity will be one of the cornerstones to progress the digital age we live in. Making meaningful contribution to digital identity is in alignment with our mission to build a better working world. And we're proud to work collaboratively with others to use our knowledge, skills, and experience to help fulfill our purpose and to create positive change.
Maybe I'll move to Peter. I'd like to hear about why do you feel that trustworthy digital identity is critical for both existing and emerging markets in your experience?
Thanks for letting me address this, and bear with me because I'm going to get myself all excited about this question. But so as a global organization at EY, we've got about 300,000 people in over 150 countries, and digital and the long-term value it can create is sort of top on the agenda for all of our clients in both existing and emerging markets and industries. And sort of across each of our geographies and industries that we sort of work in, we're all living real time the explosion in the sort of the volume and types of data that our lives generate. And this has sort of been enabled to a significant extent by our growing use of smart devices that sort of generate and spit out real-time data about how we engage with products and services, both online and in the physical world. And using this data, and obviously armed with increasingly sort of sophisticated business capabilities, both sort of companies, organizations, and governments across the world are now much more able to sort of shape consumer behavior like never before. And obviously that has both benefits and challenges, as we sort of recently seen. Think about COVID, and the opportunity for contact tracing has been a great opportunity. And then a lot of the narrative we've seen recently around some of the sort of influencing around elections as being maybe sort of a challenge we would see. And so with all that in mind, we're seeing the next decade being shaped by the behaviors of one of the largest generational, or the largest generational cohort in history, and that's Gen Z. And so this sort of cohort of people, they're aged between 10 and 24 years old, that make up almost 2 billion people and around 25% of the global population. They're the first generation that have been sort of they've been born entirely in the internet age, and have a smartphone penetration that nears 100% everywhere in the world. And so when we think about them, and obviously not forgetting the rest of the population, with access to services being made so easy and so seamless through these sort of devices and new interfaces, such as voice and biometric and facial recognition, for example, most of us are sharing data that actually quite unwittingly reveals more about our sort of desires and interests and preferences and our movements to things like search engines and our leading brands that we do to our families and friends. And so our phones and sort of social media platforms, they're exchanging our data for free services, and subsequently have more data about us and that we're publicly making available than we realize. And what's interesting, Joni, if you sort of couple that with the growing emergence of technologies that are now starting to power human augmentation, so another growing trend that includes things like 5G and AI and autonomous vehicles and robotics and VR and a number of those things, we're actually starting to see sort of society and emergence of new entrants at the sort of the cusp of this revolution. And this revolution sort of requires its own infrastructure that can enable the real-time sort of sensing of customer interactions, real-time processing and transmission of data that's going to deliver these sort of dynamic experiences that Atul sort of referred to a bit earlier, but are also going to be sort of expected to be secure and trusted. And digital ID is at the heart of that, making sort of digital services and infrastructure much more intelligent and resilient. And in some ways, digital ID will go a long way to redefine the value proposition of trust for both organizations and governments. And it's going to be increasingly obvious when it's not there. So enabling that sort of trustworthy digital identity framework, it's going to be critical to ensure privacy, security, and ethical practice of digital ID management sort of around the world. And getting it right is going to be critical to sort of making sure that outcomes are fair and just for both consumers and businesses.
thank you for bringing in the concept and the importance of the framework. I think that in this digital transformation, we couldn't agree more. Getting digital identity right is how we would unlock all of those benefits of smart cities and smart health. And the way that we get there with a level playing field, public and private working together, is that Pan-Canadian Trust Framework, among other tools. So thanks so much for sharing, that passion and that leadership on those views. And this is certainly important work for all of Canadian society to ensure that these technologies work for us and for the benefit. Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for that, Peter. I'd like to talk a little bit about, as we're thinking about society, move a little bit to economy. And this question is for Atul. So I'd like to ask about how do you see digital identity shaping and changing the Canadian and the global digital economy? And what steps is EY taking particularly to address those challenges that are associated with the digital transformation?
Absolutely, Joni. And that's a great question, actually. So if you look at digital identity, it does not only include the technology piece. A big part of it is process. Like, for example, we were talking to the team that implemented digital identity in Ireland, and what we learned from their own experiences, almost 60 to 70% of it was around the business processes, the legislation, the policies, and all that, right? And only a smaller segment of it was around the technology. And also what we have to understand is digital identity is not just about the authentication piece. Rather, if you look at the entire 9 yards of digital identity, it is about the life cycle, the system, the processes, and some of the key applications and so on. So there is a whole ecosystem around it. But to my earlier point, right, this digital identity is not just a security control, rather it is an enabler for the business. And as soon as we say business, we are talking about both micro and macroeconomic, and it has an impact there. So now if you think about the current landscape, what the customers are looking for, and in the current COVID situation, they are looking for services which is available anytime, anywhere, by any device, whether it is cloud hosted and all. So the ecosystem in last couple of years itself has changed. Some of the points which Peter made, right, around AI and all that is what we are living in today, right? So as the customer expectations are evolving, what the private sector and the public sector has to do with the digital identity is to establish the digital trust. And if the digital trust is not there, the adoption of all the digital changes which the enterprises or the government or the provinces are trying to do is not going to be effective. So at EY, coming to the second part of your question, at EY, we are helping our public as well as private sector client with this new age digital identity, which includes the governance, the access transformation, ongoing operations, because operationalization and sustainment is also a big part of it. And if we want to unleash the full potential of digital identity, we have to think about that big picture. Fortunately for us, right, we have been part of some of the world's largest digital transformation, where we have delivered the solution for more than 65 million digital identities. And those are some of the largest, right? Almost more than the population of Canada, I would say. So at EY, we have seen this transformation very closely. We have enabled our clients to get to the full potential. And overall, now with this partnership with DIACC and all the good work you have done with Pan-Canadian Trust Framework and all that, I think we have the right foundation, the right launching pad to take this forward.
Yeah, so many important points there. Thank you for calling out the global commonality, the global aspects, also the focus on, really some of the harder part is the business and the policy models around, and the technology. We have those tools that are there, and then continue to evolve. I think we've heard a few times now as well, trust and how important trust is for adoption. And so, we cannot stress that enough. And so this engagement of the public and the private sector working together, at least from some research that we've performed, plays a big role in ensuring that the public sees that there's checks and balances between public and private sector working together. So back to that collaborative. Well, we talked a little bit about the global digital economy and the actions that EY is taking. Atul, could you tell me a bit what you think in terms of what role does Canada have to play in terms of being a digital identity and trust services leader?
And I think at the current time, right, Canada has a significant role with everything that's going not only within our border, just outside the border into, I mean, there are a lot of things happening as we can see, right? I think Canada is quite unique in its way, right? If you look at the ecosystem of Canadian digital identity, it is very much distributed between the province, government of Canada, and the immigration IRCC, right? Because from a jurisdiction point of view itself, the digital identity is with the provinces for most of the individuals who are born in Canada. But anybody who migrated to Canada, just like me, the jurisdiction of their identity, the digital identity, is with IRCC. And that presents a unique set of challenges and at the same time, the opportunity. Luckily, I mean, there are a lot of digital identity implementation out there. Like if you look at some of the Nordic countries, the adoption rate is at around 70% or more. Whereas in some of the countries like UK, Germany and all, the adoption rate is at 3%. And although in some places there was a collaboration between private and public sector, in some cases it was not. Like in Ireland, it's only it's mainly run on the public sector side. The private sector has not been integrated, but still the adoption rate is more than 50%, right? So now what we have to think now, bringing it all back to Canada. Now, from a Canadian point of view, considering the jurisdiction is so distributed, I think the way we have to think about it is it has to be federated based, with collaboration between public and private sector, with collaboration between federal or government of Canada and the provinces, to enable that trust and deliver that enhanced experience that we are all looking for, right? I think that's the model which might work. There are still a lot of questions. There are still a lot of unknowns, but overall, I think we are heading in the right direction as long as we think about federated, the trust model and all that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I also relate very much, being an immigrant to Canada myself. How nice would it have been to provide that information to the federal government and then say, here, send it over to the province, please. But we don't have those connections yet. And so solving this at the federated level, with that diversity across the federal government, I think that I agree that's also what makes us very unique, and for our model to be ideally adopted in other places that have, that are diverse as well. So thanks for sharing that. I couldn't agree more. I'd like to come back to Abhishek. I'd like to ask you a bit. We've talked about all the great work that EY is doing, collaboration and trust, and we're really thrilled to welcome you to the DIACC. So I'd like to ask specifically, what was it that drew your organization to join and become a part of the DIACC community?
I think part of it is, Joni, things that you, Peter, and Atul were mentioning, which is the importance of having this robust framework. And the framework is quite important, but one of the key words that was used is adoption, right? And adoption means that making sure that this notion of utility that gets created, whether it's trusted, whether it's accepted by province or federal or private and public sector, at some point, we need to figure out a mechanism to make it useful for people to use, right? How does it make my life easier? And that's exactly where EY sort of operates, working with our organizations, our clients, to bring some of these things to reality, right? DIACC is leading the charge in convening important public and private sector bodies to standardize a common definition. We're helping create appropriate policies and frameworks needed to further the social and economic interests of Canadians. Our diverse teams at EY and the deep sector expertise that we're just talking about, they position us well to actually provide a meaningful contribution to furthering the agenda in Canada, whether it be working with financial services clients, telecom clients, media and technology, or public sector clients. We understand the business challenges and the opportunities to deploy these unique constructs like digital identity across a number of areas which solve consumer challenges. We bring in expertise like cybersecurity, customer experience, technology. Each one of them is vital in the strong development of a digital identity framework and adoption of the digital identity framework. We're glad that we can contribute towards development of things like pre-assessment and assessment methodologies. We're excited to work with our industry participants to develop the necessary programs that aid in the adoption of the framework today, but also contribute to improving the framework moving forward. That's what really excites us, and that's why we're here.
That's amazing, and it's so it's so wonderful to hear. And we are in an exciting time where we're alpha testing the framework and getting set to put it into adoption. And we couldn't agree more that adoption really is the piece of the puzzle. And so by working through that collaboration to get it into the adoption and to evolve, because technology and its use and culture will continue to evolve. So we're thrilled to welcome you and to collaborate to make this framework and this space the best it can be for Canada and for the world. So my last question for today, I'm a little sad it's my last question. This has been such a great interview. Thank you all. So I'd like to move to Peter. What else should we know that we didn't cover in today's discussion? Anything else you'd like to share?
I think, Joni, really it's probably a recap. So, I think everybody should recognize the role of digital identity as a critical business enabler. Doesn't matter which sector you operate in, and the wealth of possibilities that it can unleash. And so at EY, we're focused on helping businesses to sort of balance the need for that modern sort of customer value proposition that comes along with sort of great sort of user experience with sort of smart security and privacy controls that are relevant and sort of fit for purpose for operating in the sort of the digital world that is constantly transforming. And that's not easy. It takes time. It's a journey that requires imagination and discipline to execute, but it's absolutely a must. And those organizations that sort of don't do this will get left behind. And so I think, by recognizing sort of the transformational ability of digital ID and elevating its strategic role in the business, brands and organizations can sort of cultivate previously sort of unimagined experiences and value. They can drive longer term sort of customer engagement and loyalty, and sort of build more predictable and sort of sustainable outcomes. I think it's that sort of important. And so, grounded in trust, as we've talked about this morning, digital ID really is a sort of a modern solution and a key enabler to creating that long-term value that many organizations are driving to right now.
So thank you all for being a part of this community, contributing your leadership, and thanks for taking the time to join this discussion today. And for people who would like to see more of what EY is doing and how we're working together, watch this space. I know that there's going to be great news to come in the time ahead. So thank you all, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Joni.
Joni, take care.
Thanks, Joni.
Thank you.